So for this video, I want to talk about a big announcement that me and Ian from Ian the Reader have that is Stephen King related. Obviously, you've seen the title of the video already, but we are announcing the new Stephen King book club that'll be taking place exclusively on the Bookastromer Discord. Now, what is this? What is this? What is it? So basically the idea behind the Stephen King book club, which will be run by me and Ian from Ian the Reader. Definitely check him out if you're not already. He's fantastic. Basically, the idea is that Ian has still a bunch of Stephen King books left that he has to read. I think he's read a bit more than half of them now, but he's still got probably somewhere between 30 and 40 left. And I'm kind of getting the itch to reread a bit more Stephen King. Like, I haven't really done a lot of Stephen King rereads like I have done in the past. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to choose a bunch of Stephen King books, one per month, that Ian has left to read. So like they're new to him and that I'm also willing and wanting to reread. So this will be fun, especially since I just released a bunch of Stephen King videos about rereads, like my books that I liked more upon a reread, books that I liked less upon a reread, and Stephen King books that I want or need to reread. So this will definitely scratch that itch for me, and then hopefully Ian can find some new Stephen King favorites for him, because he's read maybe like half of them, but he still has a bunch of great ones left, in my opinion. So hopefully you guys will join us, and basically for this video, I'm going to be explaining the books that we're going to be starting this year, because it will be starting in October. And yeah, we're going to be starting in October, and it will bleed over. And I'm going to be going over the schedule for this year. So the books that we're reading in October, November, and December, in that order. And then I'm also going to be going over the books that we're going to potentially read for next year. Although I can't give a concrete schedule yet for next year, because we are going to be factoring in potentially Stephen King's new book that's coming out sometime next year, Always Holly. So we're definitely going to be doing that book in the month, whatever it's going to be released. My prediction is going to be either May or September. That's when he typically releases books, but you never know. It could be any time, but it's definitely going to revolve around that. But I'm definitely going to tell you guys which books that we're like 90% sure we're going to read next year for the Stephen King Book Club. But I bet you guys are curious what we're doing this year, and you're going to want to gear up for that, because October is right around the corner in a couple of months. So in October, and it's also fitting because October, we're going to also be doing the Dark Tower readathon over on the Bookastromer Discord. And you don't necessarily have to read Stephen King to participate, but there will be one prompt that will definitely benefit your team a lot if you read at least one chunky Stephen King book. And we'll have a list of which Stephen King books constitute as chunky. But one of them is definitely Under the Dome. Ba-bam! So October, kicking off the Stephen King Book Club with a bang, a doozy, a chunky book, Under the Dome. And this one I'm definitely curious to see if I still like it, because I famously said before that Under the Dome is Stephen King's worst ending. So it's going to be fun and interesting to see if I still enjoy the book, even though I already know the train wreck, what is going to happen at the very end. So if you want to join us for that, if you're a first-time reader and are interested to see what this book is all about, it's basically about a small town that gets encapsulated, is that a word? Gets trapped under a giant dome, and the people inside the dome have to figure out what's going on. The people outside of the dome are freaking out, like, what is this happen? What is this? It's a fun book, admittedly, and I was really enjoying the first 900 pages of it. And then the very end, not so much. But I am definitely interested to reread it, just to kind of concretely say, like, if this is a really good Stephen King book with a bad ending, or if it's just kind of mid-tier, if it's bad. Like, I don't really know where my heart lies with it, just because I loved most of the book, and then the ending definitely left a sour taste in my mouth. But hopefully you join us for October during the readathon. You don't have to join the readathon, but just know that October, we're starting out with a bang under the dome. And then for November and December, we're going to be doing The Shining and Doctor Sleep, respectfully. So November, we're going to be doing The Shining, obviously a classic Stephen King book, one of his most well-known. Probably a lot of y'all have already read this, but if you're interested in rereading it, we're going to be doing it in November. And then Doctor Sleep in December, which I kind of like a bit more than The Shining, which is an unpopular opinion, I know, but I just think it's better written, and I think it's just more interesting and compelling, which I know is unpopular, but anyway, that's what we're doing for November and December. So if you want to, reread The Shining or potentially read it for the first time with us, definitely join us for that. That'll be a lot of fun. And then immediately after that in December, we're going to be doing Doctor Sleep, which I think is very underrated. Great book. Definitely join us for that if you've read it before or if you're reading it for the first time. Definitely check it out. So those are the 3 books that were definitely going to be read this year for the Stephen King Book Club. October, Under the Dome. November, The Shining. And December, Doctor Sleep. Now we're going to jump into the Stephen King books that we're going to potentially read in 2025. We don't necessarily know the order yet because we're going to wait for the release date of Always Holly, which I'm sure will be coming out next year. We'll see. Yeah, so we can't finalize the schedule just yet, but we've basically finalized which books that we're going to pick up. But yeah, let's jump into that. The first one being Different Seasons. This one will be fun because I think a lot of constant readers have probably read this before, or they've read the novellas, at least some of the novellas that are in this collection. But I figured this would be a fun one to do because it's a great book, and probably a lot of Stephen King fans would be willing to reread it. And then I really want people, if they've never read it, to definitely read this because it's one of my all-time favorites. I'm going to have a lot of fun rereading it. Ian has not read this yet, or at least he hasn't read all of the novellas because it has 4 novellas. They're all extremely well written, and I love it. And yeah, I'm definitely excited for Ian to check it out. I'm excited to reread it, and I'm excited to get everyone's reactions, whether they're rereading it or reading it for the first time. This next one, Ian has also not read, and I have not read it in quite a long time, and I'm definitely interested to see, where I lie with it, because when I read it, it was okay, but it's kind of forgettable. Not one of my all-time favorites, but it's one of the ones that I mentioned in my Stephen King video where I kind of need to reread it just to see where I can't even talk. It's from a Buick 8. Like I'm trying to say, I want to see where my opinion lies with this book because it's been a long time since I read it and I had mixed opinions on it. I'm going to be interested to see what Ian thinks about it, and I'm definitely interested to see what y'all think about it. I'm sure a lot of y'all haven't read this book necessarily. It's probably one of Stephen King's least popular books, not even in terms of rating, but just in terms of the amount of people who have actually read this book. It's definitely not one of his most popular books. So I'm definitely interested to see if people get along with it or what. So that'll be a fun one to read. Another book that we're for sure going to do is Rose Matter. Now, this one is kind of a tale of two halves where the first half of this book, I really liked it. And then the second half, he kind of introduces an element that I wasn't the biggest fan of. But maybe if I go into this book knowing that that's going to happen, knowing what's already going to happen, maybe I'll kind of accept it more and I'll enjoy it more for what it is. Because it does have a really compelling female-led character. And it admittedly, the first half was really good. And I kind of just got distracted by a glaring thing that happens in the book that I wasn't the biggest fan of. But it'll be fun to reread. And I don't think Ian has read this one before, so I'm definitely interested to see what he thinks. I know a lot of people love this book, and they definitely cite it as one of his most underrated gems, especially from the 90s, which, a lot of people cite as one of his worst decades. But yeah, it'll be fun to reread it and to get everyone's reactions to it. One that we're thinking of doing in April, which of course is going to be a Battle of the Bands readathon month, so we wanted to kind of pick a shorter book. If his newest book comes out in April, oh well. But we're going to try to slot in The Running Man for April in Battle of the Bands. It's a very short Richard Bachman book, very fast paced. It'll be a fun reread. And again, I don't know. I think this is one of the ones that Ian hasn't read before. I think a couple of them, or maybe one or two of them, he has read before, so they will also be rereads for him. But the majority of these books he has not read. So I don't think he's read The Running Man. It's pretty interesting. It's not one of my favorite Richard Bachman books, but it's fun. It's definitely a fun book. It's very fast paced. It's got like 100 chapters. It's kind of got that Richard Bachman dystopian feel to it. It's pretty good, and yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Definitely check it out if you haven't already, or if you want a really fun reread, check it out. One book that we're definitely going to do is Duma Key. Now, I believe this is a reread for Ian. I'm going to double check that. I'm going to fact check myself here. Yeah, I think Ian has read this before, but it's one of the books that he's also willing to reread, and for good reason, because Duma Key is definitely one of his favorites. It definitely solidified in my top 10 Stephen King novels of all time. So good. And we're definitely thinking about doing this sometime in the summer, like June, July. It's definitely a good summer read because it's one of the rare Stephen King books that takes place in Florida in a warm climate on a beach. So it definitely makes sense to read this in the summertime. So definitely plan on to save that book for the summertime. Either if you've read it before and want to reread it, or if you want to read it for the first time and are kind of waiting for the right moment, definitely read Duma Key with us summer 2025. Also, potentially for July, which is usually the time we also do another round of Battle of the Bands. We want to do another short book. And one of my all-time favorites that I don't think Ian has read yet is The Colorado Kid. This one's very short, so definitely great for a readathon. Definitely unpopular, but I think for unwanted reasons. I think everyone should read this book, at least if you're a constant reader. Not everyone in the world, but like if you're a constant reader and you haven't checked this one out, definitely read this one with us. Probably another summertime read in July, like I said, because it's just super short. But yeah, it's so good. I think it's a rewarding reread too. So if you've read this before and maybe necessarily didn't enjoy it, I would say pick it back up with us. Maybe you'll have a better time with it upon a reread. And definitely if you haven't checked it out before and you're a constant reader, definitely check it out. And I know it gets its criticism because it's very short and it's kind of a mystery thriller that doesn't necessarily have a great resolution. Or I shouldn't say that. I think it has a great ending, but a lot of people are unsatisfied with it. But I think it's intentional by Stephen King that he does that. But a lot of people don't like it. You can do what you want, but me and Ian are going to read it. So come join us, please. Next up, I think we're going to read Full Dark, No Stars, which Ian has not yet read before. I've actually read this a few times. Definitely one of my all-time favorites. It's a novella collection, 4 novellas as usual for Stephen King. It's probably in my top 20 Stephen King books of all time. It's definitely on the darker side. Like a couple of these, like in a lot of ways, this could almost be like a Richard Bachman collection, because definitely something like 1922 has a Richard Bachman feel to it. All of these tales, like it's called Full Dark, No Stars, so there's not really a lot of sunshine and rainbows with these stories here. They're very dark, kind of nihilistic, and very dark, some of these stories. Like Big Driver, the second novella, can kind of be hard to read at times, but it's still very good and top-notch Stephen King writing. So definitely check it out if you haven't already, or if you want to read it with us. Like I've said, like you don't have to be a first-time reader with some of these. Like if you're in the mood to reread Stephen King like I am, definitely check it out with me and Ian. But it'll be a lot of fun to get Ian's reaction from this novella collection. We also want to do Christine, which I don't believe Ian has read yet, which is crazy. Definitely it's kind of one of those ones where it's well known. Like a lot of people know Christine as being like, oh, that's Stephen King writing a killer car. But maybe not a lot of people have actually read the book or maybe even watched the movie. But it's a classic for a reason. It's not necessarily scary, I don't think. For me, like inanimate objects coming to life isn't really that scary. And Stephen King you know, he's written several of these in his career, including like The Monkey and Chattery Teeth, and those ones just kind of come off as silly. But with this one, it really works. Christine, a car coming to life, is really cool, and it has really fantastic characters. Overall, this is definitely one of his all-time best novels. So definitely check it out if you haven't already, and if you're up for it, come reread it with us. And like I said, Ian hasn't read this yet, so definitely excited to get his opinion on it. And then in October, kind of what we're thinking, you know, obviously this could change for various reasons, but in October, we like to do Stephen King themed readathon. This year's theme, like I said, is going to be Dark Tower themed. Next year could be something completely different. I don't know. We're going to be doing like 3 different things. The first one was kind of just like villains. The second one was kind of Stephen King Clue readathon. This time it's going to be Dark Tower themed, where your team is going to be trying to climb the Dark Tower. Whoever climbs the highest is the winner, kind of deal. Next year's could be something completely different. I haven't even said the damn book yet. But basically what we're thinking about in October is Revival, which is definitely one of my all-time favorites. I reread it recently, and it jumped up all the way into my top 10. That's how much I loved it the second time around. And that was in my video, by the way, of like Stephen King books that I enjoyed more upon a reread. Definitely so. And this is a very fitting book for October, for spooky season. It's so gripping. It's so tense. The ending is unforgettable. And yeah, you basically get this man's life story from when he was very young all the way up until, you know, I won't spoil anything, but it's so good. And super excited for Ian to read this one in particular, because it's one of my all-time favorites. And it's going to be fun to read it in spooky season. This next one is fun because I love it and not a lot of people do. And that would be Roadwork. And we're thinking probably November, probably just because I think a lot of this book does actually take place in November. It definitely bleeds in and out of a few months. But yeah, very unpopular. Definitely cited as one of Stephen King's worst books. But I know a few of friends that I've met on BookTube, Josephina, Pat Savat, they love Roadwork just as much as I do. It's fantastic. Definitely one of Stephen King's most underrated books. If you haven't read it yet, definitely check it out with us. I am kind of terrified to see what Ian thinks of it. I don't know what he's going to think. Maybe he'll like it as much as me or love it, or maybe he'll hate it. I don't know, but it'll be fun. Definitely check it out if you haven't already, or Pat, Josephina, come reread it with us so that I'm not the only one who's in love with this story. But yeah, it's really good, at least in my humble opinion. So definitely check it out with us if you want to. And then I think to probably close it out in December, you know, assuming that he doesn't release his new book in December, what we're thinking about is ending it with Dreamcatcher in December, which admittedly, you know, is not one of his best books, but Ian, you know, still has to read it. And, you know, even though how do I describe this book? It's not a perfect book. It's not even a great book, but I still want to reread it because it still has some really memorable scenes and some interesting characters. And yeah, it'll be fun to read in December. It's definitely a good winter book, and I'm definitely interested to see what Ian thinks of it. And, you know, it'll be fun to get people's first reaction, like if they've never read the book, to get their reaction to what is admittedly a very weird Stephen King book. Come read it with us. Yeah, so that's probably the closer for 2025. December will be Dreamcatcher. All right, so that is my announcement video for the Stephen King Book Club, which will be run on the Bookastromer Discord by both me and Ian from Eden the Reader. And definitely go check out his channel. He's fantastic. He's also a big Stephen King fan, and he still has a bunch of Stephen King left to read, and I want to join in on his journey and reread a lot of these books, either for better or for worse. But yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Definitely check it out. Like I said, October is going to be our first foray into this long journey, and we'll see if people jive with it. Maybe we'll continue with it in 2026, as long as there's Stephen King books left for Ian to read that I'm also interested to read. I don't know. We kind of had to balance it out between books that he has left to read and then I'm kind of willing to also reread, because there's a lot of Stephen King books that I don't want to reread. You know, like I think one of the ones he had left was Lacey's Story, and I'm like, no, I'm not rereading that. I'm sorry. But yeah, it'll still be a lot of fun. Definitely with the books that we picked out, we're going to have a lot of fun. So definitely check it out. It's going to be on the Bookastronomy Discord starting in October with Under the Dome. So join us for that, and hopefully join us for, if not all of these books, maybe, you know, for some of them. Definitely check it out with us. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic day. Subscribe if you haven't already, and long days and pleasant nights.